Imagine settling into your seat for a 16-hour flight from Delhi to Chicago. You've paid for business class, a significant premium, expecting comfort, service, and a flat bed to rest. Instead, you find a seat with a massive piece of metal sticking out of it. You call the crew, and their solution is not a new seat, but a roll of gaffer tape. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. For years, this was the reality of flying Air India. It was a passenger lottery. You might get a functioning seat, or you might get one that wouldn't recline, with a broken tray table and a non-functional entertainment screen. You might find stained upholstery, grimy windows, and filthy toilets, so notoriously dysfunctional that on some long-haul flights they would become completely clogged, forcing the aircraft to divert. On one flight, a passenger reported that the window panel simply fell off mid-flight. These weren't isolated incidents, the kind of one-off failures that can happen to any airline. This was a systemic rot. A 2025 survey revealed a shocking statistic. 79% of passengers who had flown Air India in the past year reported major issues with the quality and maintenance of aircraft. That number was up from an already high 55% just the year before. The airline that once proudly called itself the Maharaja of the skies had become a ghost fleet, haunted by decades of neglect. The irony is staggering. This is the airline that, in its golden age, was so revered for its luxury and service that it literally served as the inspiration for a fledgling Singapore Airlines. Its founder, the legendary industrialist J.R.D. Tata, wasn't just a businessman. He was India's first licensed pilot, a man who personally flew the airline's inaugural mail flight in 1932. So, how did the airline that once defined world-class air travel, the proud global ambassador for a newly independent India, fall so far? How did the Maharaja become a global punchline, a symbol of national failure kept alive only by the relentless infusion of taxpayer money? This is the story of that spectacular fall, and the audacious high-stakes gamble to see if it can ever fly high again. The story of Air India begins as a story of vision. In 1932, Jahangir Ratanji Dadabhoi Tata, or JRD as he was universally known, founded Tata Airlines. It was an act of pure entrepreneurial passion. The airline's first flight was a single-engine de Havilland Puss Moth, flown by JRD himself, carrying mail from Karachi to Bombay. In its first year, it carried just 155 passengers, but turned a profit. It was efficient, it was prestigious, and it was the foundation of modern aviation in India. After India's independence, the airline, now renamed Air India, became a public-private partnership and the nation's flag carrier. It was a symbol of a new India stepping onto the world stage. Its service was legendary, its brand iconic. But in 1953, the Indian government, driven by the socialist policies of the era, made a fateful decision. It nationalized the entire airline sector. 8 domestic airlines were merged into Indian Airlines, and Air India's international operations were taken over completely by the state. For J.R.D. Tata, who was kept on as chairman but now answered to politicians, the move was a deep personal blow. He saw it as a betrayal. This was more than just a change of ownership. It was a fundamental corruption of the airline's purpose. It was no longer a competitive, customer-focused business driven by aviation pioneers. It had become an extension of the state, a tool of the government. The slow creep of bureaucracy began almost immediately. The airline's management was increasingly filled not with aviation experts, but with civil servants and bureaucrats who understood government procedure better than airline operations. Decisions were no longer driven by commercial logic, but by political expediency. The airline became a vehicle for political patronage, a place where politicians and officials could make requests that, as one insider put it, the airline cannot refuse. This fostered an archaic work culture, where accountability vanished and inefficiency became entrenched. This slow decline accelerated into a nosedive in 2007. In a move that defied all commercial logic, the government forced the merger of Air India, the international carrier, with Indian Airlines, the domestic one. The two were, in the words of one analysis, totally opposite of each other in all probable dimensions. They had different fleets, different pay scales, different operational procedures, and, most importantly, vastly different corporate cultures. The result was a catastrophe. The merger created a financial black hole, with costs spiraling and debts mounting. More damagingly, it sparked years of internal conflict, with massive discontent and frustration among staff from both sides, creating a dysfunctional organization that was at war with itself. The dream of synergy became a nightmare of chaos. By the late 2000s, Air India had ceased to be a functioning airline in any real commercial sense. It had become a zombie, a state-owned enterprise that existed for one purpose: to consume money. It was a perpetual bailout machine, kept lurching forward by a constant drip feed of public funds. The numbers are difficult to comprehend. By August 2021, just before the privatization, the airline was saddled with a mountain of debt totaling a staggering 61,562 crore rupees, or about $8.2 billion. For years, it was losing an average of 20 crore rupees, about $2.6 million, every single day. The government's response was not to fix the underlying problems, but to simply throw more money at them. In 2012, the UPA government approved a massive bailout package of 30,000 crore rupees, nearly $4 billion, to be infused over 9 years. It was one of the largest corporate bailouts in Indian history. It did nothing. The money was swallowed by the machine, and the losses continued to mount. By 2011, even before the full bailout, the airline had already accumulated a debt of 426 billion rupees and an operating loss of 220 billion rupees. This relentless financial hemorrhage had a devastating cascading effect on the airline's operations. With no money to reinvest, the fleet grew older and more decrepit by the year. While competitors were flying new, fuel-efficient jets, Air India was flying antiques. As of early 2025, analysis showed that over a third of Air India's fleet was more than 10 years old, with 43 of its aircraft having been in service for over 15 years. This stood in stark contrast to its primary domestic rival, Indigo, a low-cost carrier whose fleet was one of the youngest in the world, with the vast majority of its planes being less than 5 years old. This neglect was what passengers experienced firsthand. The broken seats, the dead entertainment systems, the clogged toilets. These were the direct, tangible consequences of an airline that was financially and culturally bankrupt. The Maharaja was not just grounded, he was rusting away on the tarmac, a national embarrassment propped up by the very taxpayers he was failing to serve. By the late 2000s, the Indian government was out of options and out of patience. The perpetual bailout machine had become politically and financially unsustainable. The first serious attempt to sell a stake in the airline, back in 2000 to 2001, had failed after political opposition scared off a joint bid from Singapore Airlines and the Tata Group. A second attempt in 2018 was an even greater humiliation. The government put a 76% stake up for sale, but the terms were so unattractive, requiring the buyer to take on a significant portion of the debt, that it failed to receive a single bid. The Maharaja was not just broke, he was untouchable. The situation had become a national crisis. In March 2021, India's then Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Singh Puri laid out the stakes in the starkest possible terms. "There is no choice," he said. "We either privatize or we close the airline. We run a loss of 20 crore rupees every day." It was a public admission of defeat. The government could no longer afford to keep its zombie airline alive. This time, the sale had to work. The terms were sweetened. The government would sell 100% of the airline and allow the bidder to negotiate how much of the crippling debt they would absorb. It was a final, desperate roll of the dice. On October 8, 2021, the gamble paid off. The government announced that a winning bid had been accepted. After 69 years in the wilderness of state control, Air India was coming home. The buyer was the Tata Group. The announcement was a moment of profound national and corporate significance. For the Tata Group, it was the emotional return of a lost family jewel, a chance to reclaim the legacy of their visionary founder, J.R.D. Tata. For the nation, it was a moment of hope, a belief that one of India's most respected and capable conglomerates could succeed where the state had so spectacularly failed. But behind the emotion was a hard-nosed business deal of immense complexity. The Tata Group's winning bid was for an enterprise value of 18,000 crore rupees, or about $2.4 billion at the time. This wasn't a simple cash purchase. The deal was structured in two parts. First, Tata would pay 2,700 crore rupees in cash directly to the government. Second, and far more significantly, they would take on 15,300 crore rupees of Air India's existing debt onto their own books. This structure was critical, but it also masked a crucial detail. What happened to the rest of the debt? Of the total 61,562 crore burden, Tata absorbed only a fraction. The vast majority, a staggering 46,000 crore rupees, over $6 billion, was transferred to a special purpose vehicle called AI Asset Holding Limited, which remained under government ownership. In simple terms, the Indian taxpayer was left to foot the bill for decades of mismanagement. The homecoming was celebrated as a victory for privatization and reform, but it came at a monumental cost to the public purse, a nuance often lost in the patriotic fervor of the moment. What the Tata Group acquired in January 2022 wasn't one airline. It was a convoluted, dysfunctional portfolio of four separate, often competing, aviation entities. It was a four-headed hydra, and each head had its own culture, its own fleet, and its own set of problems. First, there was the legacy, full-service Air India, with its massive international network, aging wide-body fleet, and deeply entrenched public sector work culture. Second, there was its low-cost subsidiary, Air India Express, which primarily flew short-haul international routes to the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Third, there was Vistara, a premium full-service domestic and international airline, operated as a joint venture with the globally respected Singapore Airlines. And fourth, there was Air Asia India, a low-cost domestic carrier, another joint venture, this time with Malaysia's Air Asia Group. The strategic challenge was immense. To compete effectively, Tata needed to simplify this chaos. Their master plan, announced in late 2022, was as ambitious as it was logical. They would merge the four-headed hydra into a streamlined, two-pronged behemoth. The first prong would be a single, world-class, full-service carrier. This would be achieved by merging the premium, customer-focused Vistara into the legacy Air India. The goal was to combine Air India's vast network and landing slots with Vistara's superior product and service culture, creating an airline that could finally compete with global giants like Emirates and Qatar Airways. The second prong would be a single, powerful, low-cost carrier. This involved merging Air Asia India, rebranded as AIX Connect, into Air India Express. This would create a single, unified budget airline with the scale and efficiency to take on India's undisputed domestic market leader, Indigo. At the heart of this grand consolidation was the partnership with Singapore Airlines SIA. As part of the Vistara merger, SIA didn't just cash out, it doubled down. It invested a further 2,059 crore rupees into the new, enlarged Air India, taking a strategic 25.1% stake in the combined entity. This was a monumental vote of confidence. It meant the new Air India wouldn't just have Tata's financial muscle, it would have the operational DNA and world-class expertise of one of the planet's best-run airlines infused directly into its boardroom. The stage was set for one of the most complex and ambitious corporate turnarounds the world had ever seen. The sheer scale of the transformation is best understood by looking at the airline before and after the takeover. For a year after the takeover, the Tata Group worked largely behind the scenes, diagnosing the rot and formulating its grand strategy. Then, in February 2023, it made a move so audacious it sent shockwaves through the global aviation industry. It placed the largest single aircraft order in history. This was more than just a fleet renewal. It was a thunderous declaration of intent. Air India was no longer just trying to survive. It was preparing to conquer. The firm order was for a staggering 470 aircraft from both Airbus and Boeing, with a combined list price of $70 billion. As if that wasn't enough, the airline later topped this up with an additional order for 100 more Airbus jets, bringing the total commitment to an incredible 570 new planes. The composition of the order revealed a meticulously crafted global strategy. For its long-haul ambitions, Air India ordered a fleet of the world's most advanced wide-body jets: 40 Airbus A350s, 20 Boeing 787 Dreamliners, and 10 of the forthcoming Boeing 777X. These were the planes destined to reclaim the lucrative non-stop routes to North America, Europe, and Australia from the Gulf carriers. For the domestic and short-haul international battleground, the order was just as massive: 140 Airbus A320neos, 70 larger A321neos, and 190 Boeing 737 MAX. This was the new workhorse fleet, designed for fuel efficiency and operational reliability, aimed squarely at challenging Indigo's domestic dominance. This wasn't just buying new planes, it was buying a new future. The promise of a new Air India is already taking to the skies. The first of the flagship Airbus A350s, with their gleaming new livery, began entering service in late 2024. By early 2025, they were deployed on strategically vital routes like Delhi to New York's JFK and Newark airports, finally offering passengers a truly world-class product with modern business-class suites and, for the first time on these routes, a proper premium economy cabin. This is the Air India of the future, the airline Tata promised to build. But for most passengers, that future is still a long way off. While the new A350s grab headlines, the vast majority of Air India's fleet remains the same aging, dilapidated aircraft it inherited. The airline has committed $400 million to a massive program to completely retrofit the interiors of 106 of these legacy wide-body and narrow-body planes. It's a critical and necessary step, but it is a slow, painstaking process fraught with delays. The first Boeing 787 Dreamliner only flew to California for its refurbishment in July 2025, with a second scheduled to follow in October. They aren't expected back in service until the end of the year. The entire 787 retrofit program isn't scheduled for completion until mid-2027. The older Boeing 777s are even further behind. Their refurbishment won't even begin until early 2027 and is now expected to finish by late 2028, a year later than planned, due to global supply chain shortages for seats and other components. This creates a dangerous and volatile situation for the airline. For the next 3 to 5 years, Air India will effectively be two different airlines flying under a single brand. One is the new premium airline represented by the A350s. The other is the old, broken airline represented by the yet-to-be retrofitted legacy fleet. This creates a passenger lottery. A customer can book a premium-priced ticket for a round trip to London and experience a state-of-the-art cabin on the outbound flight, only to be met with broken seats and dead entertainment screens on the return. This brand schizophrenia is a massive risk. It makes it impossible to market a consistent product and directly undermines the promise of reliability and quality that is central to the turnaround. Every passenger who feels they've lost the lottery is a potential customer lost forever, making the long journey to rebuild trust that much harder. As monumental as the financial and logistical challenges are, the single greatest obstacle to Air India's revival is not made of metal or money. It's made of people. The ultimate battle is for the airline's soul, a fight to transform a deeply ingrained culture of public sector complacency into one of private sector competitiveness and customer obsession. The task is a human minefield, integrating over 30,000 employees from 4 radically different corporate cultures. Vistara's staff were trained in the disciplined, premium service ethos of its part owner, Singapore Airlines. AirAsia India's team was steeped in the aggressive, cost-conscious hustle of a pure low-cost carrier. And Air India's workforce, for its part, was a product of 70 years of state ownership, a culture often characterized by powerful unions, bureaucratic inertia, and a profound disconnect from the customer. The fault lines of this culture clash erupted into public view in 2024. In April, a significant number of Vistara pilots staged a protest by calling in sick en masse. They were resisting a new, unified pay structure that reduced their guaranteed flying hours from 70 to 40 per month, which they feared would lead to a significant pay cut. The protest forced the cancellation of over 125 flights, causing chaos for thousands of passengers. Just a month later, a similar crisis hit the low-cost arm, as a large group of Air India Express cabin crew staged their own mass sick leave, protesting what they alleged was unequal treatment and mismanagement in the post-merger integration with AIX Connect. These were not simple labor disputes over pay. They were symptoms of a much deeper cultural resistance, a clash between the old ways and the new, and a profound anxiety among employees about their place in the transformed airline. Experts warn that truly changing this culture could take 15 to 20 years. Compounding this challenge is a critical, often overlooked structural flaw in the privatization deal itself. While Tata bought the airline, it did not buy its primary maintenance provider, AI Engineering Services Limited. This crucial entity, responsible for the safety and upkeep of Air India's fleet, was kept separate and remains a government-owned company. This means Tata's multi-billion-dollar investment in new and refurbished aircraft is being entrusted to an organization still operating with the legacy systems and culture of the old regime. AIESL has a documented history of chronic underinvestment, inadequate oversight, and primitive record-keeping, famously using Microsoft Excel for tasks that require specialized aviation software. This ghost of government past represents a massive, hidden operational risk. Any failure by AIESL directly threatens Air India's safety, reliability, and reputation, yet it lies outside of Tata's direct control. It is a structural weakness that could undermine the entire turnaround effort from the ground up.